Black and White Week. I hope you've enjoyed the little clips you've seen on our first 3 weeks, from things like Monsters Inc. to Mr. Rogers to last week where we did Cartoon Week with characters like Bullwinkle and Bugs Bunny and Goofy. This week I've decided to focus on some of my favorites from the black and white era. Hope you enjoy them. Oh, and don't forget to learn something about math. You need to do that too. And you can watch me work some of the math problems in this lesson. Oh, and don't forget Scruffy. Alright, so our objective today is to add and subtract radical expressions. And we'll get to see some clips of a new black and white as we go along. Like radicals is our vocab. And if they are like radicals, works just like adding like 3x and 4x together. So let's go through a few. Number 2 through 7 here, we're adding and subtracting. So on number 2, we have 14 times the square root of 3 minus 6 times the square root of 3. Notice that they're both square roots of 3. So we can do 14 minus 6, and that is going to give us 8 square roots of 3. 8 times the square root of 3. Number 3. So number 3 is 9 times the square root of 5 plus the square root of 5. That's understood to be a 1. So that's 9 plus 1 times the square root of 5. And so that's 10 times the square root of 5. Moving on to number 4, we had 6 times the square root of 2 plus 5 times the square root of 2 minus 15 times the square root of 2. There's 3 of them, but we can still, they're all square roots of 2. So 6 plus 5 minus 15 square roots of 2. And that works out to negative 4 square roots of 2. And so number 5, we've got 3 times the square root of 7 plus 5 times the square root of 2. Those are not like radicals, so we cannot add them. So the answer is 3 times the square root of 7 plus 5 times the square root of 2. 6. 5 times the square root of a minus 9 times the square root of a. They are both square roots of a, so it's 5 minus 9 times the square root of a, which is negative 4 times the square root of a. Number 7. 9 times the square root of 6a plus 6 times the square root of 5a minus 4 times the square root of 6a. So the first and last are 6a. So it's 9 minus 4 times the square root of 6a. And then that's plus 6 times the square root of 5a. So that's going to be 5 times the square root of 6a plus 6 times the square root of 5a. And that is it. You're going to work that for these problems here, 15 through 20. And let's watch our clip.
Abilene said there's a railroad there.
Railroad?
Said there was a railroad in Abilene?
Terry was saying.
Did...
I've had enough too.
What? Rainwater if we have to.
Not me. I'm heading south.
I've had enough, Dunson. Unless we try for Abilene.
And we'll get to see what happens in a little bit. When you write a radicand as a product, make sure you use a perfect square factor. So we're going to do that for these problems. Number 8, we've got the square root of 32 minus the square root of 8. And so the square root of 32 is 16 times 2. So the square root of 16 times the square root of 2. And then the square root of 8 is 4 times 2. So the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. Now the square root of 16 equals 4. So that's 4 times the square root of 2. And then the square root of 4 equals 2. So that's minus 2 times the square root of 2. These are both square roots of 2. So I can do 4 minus 2, square roots of 2. And that's going to give me 2 times the square root of 2 for my final answer. Let's go on to number 9 now. Number 9 is 4 times the square root of 12 plus the square root of 75. So the square root of 12 being 4 times 3, I can write that as 4 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 3 plus, and 25 times 3 makes 75. So the square root of 25 times the square root of 3. And so that's 4 times 2 times the square root of 3 plus 5 times the square root of 3. And that will equal 8 times the square root of 3 plus 5 times the square root of 3. They'll both be square roots of 3. So we can do 8 plus 5, which is 13, square roots of 3. Number 10. And that's 2 times the square root of 3 plus 5 times the square root of 12 minus the square root of 27. So 3 terms. And so the first one we can't do anything with, 2 times the square root of 3. The second one, though, we can write as 5 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. And the last one we can write minus the square root of 9 times the square root of 3. So we can't simplify the first term, but the second term goes to 5 times 2 times the square root of 3. And the last term goes to 3 times the square root of 3. Now let's simplify the middle term. 2 times the square root of 3 plus 10 times the square root of 3 minus 3 times the square root of 3. They're all square roots of 3. So that means I can do 2 plus 10 minus 3, square roots of 3. And so that's going to be 12 minus 3, which is 9. 9 times the square root of 3 is my final answer. Let's go to 11. 11, we have the square root of 20x minus the square root of 45x. So let's break up 20. 20 is 4 times 5. So that's the square root of 4 times the square root of 5x and minus, and that's going to be square root of 9 times the square root of 5x. So that equals 2 times the square root of 5x minus 3 times the square root of 5x. So that's going to be a 2 minus 3 times the square root of 5x, which is going to equal negative 1 times the square root of 5x, or just negative square root of 5x. All right, and number 12. Number 12, we have the square root of 28c plus the square root of, 9 times the square root of 24c. So 28 is 4 times 7, so this is square root of 4 times the square root of 7c plus 24 being 4 times 6, I can do 9 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 6c. And let's simplify on the left. That's 2 times the square root of 7c plus, and then that's going to be 3 times 2 times the square root of 6c. And we'll simplify that to 6 times the square root of 6c on the next line. So 2 times the square root of 7c plus 6 times the square root of 6c. Those are not like terms. We have to finish right there. So 2 times the square root of 7c plus 6 times the square root of 6c is my final answer. Moving on to number 13. So we have 50, the square root of 50t, minus 2 times the square root of 12t, and that's plus 3 times the square root of 2t. So 50 is 25 times 2, so we'll do the square root of 25 times the square root of 2t. And then 12 is 4 times 3, so that's minus 2 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 3t. And then that's going to be plus 3 times the square root of 2t. We can't do anything with that last term. So the first term will have 5 times the square root of 2t. And the middle term minus 2 times the square root of 3t. And then the last term is just our plus 3 times the square root of 2t. Now let's simplify the middle term. So 5 times the square root of 2t minus 4 times the square root of 3t plus 3 times the square root of 2t. So the first and last terms are both 2t's. We can put those together. So that's going to be 5 plus 3 times the square root of 2t. And then that's minus 4 times the square root of 3t. And so when we do our 5 plus 3, that gives us 8 times the square root of 2t minus 4 times the square root of 3t, and that is our answer. You'll use that pattern to work the following problems. Problems 21 through 29, and let's see some more of our clip. This is Red River with John Wayne.
There was an agreement made when you signed on. You agreed to finish this drive. I'm going to hold you to it.
How?
I don't want to have to kill you, Mailer.
With what?
All right, anybody else?
John Wayne's always good for a gunfight in his movies. Here, problem 14, we've got the geometry. We're finding the perimeter of the trapezoid shown, and you're going to give your answer as a radical expression in simplest form. So we're just going to add the sides. The square root of 50 plus the square root of 8 plus the square root of 18 plus the square root of 8. And each one of these we're going to be able to simplify. So the square root of 25 times the square root of 2 for the square root of 50. Square root of 4 times the square root of 2 for that square root of 8. square root of 9 times the square root of 2 for that, square root of 18, and then another square root of 4 times the square root of 2 for the last term. Let's simplify those. 5 times the square root of 2 plus 2 times the square root of 2 plus 3 times the square root of 2 plus 2 times the square root of 2. In this case, they were all like terms, so we can add them all together. They're all square roots of 2. So we'll do 5 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2, and that'll be times the square root of 2. And that equals 12 times the square root of 2. And let's see, that is inches. And so 12 times the square root of 2 inches is our answer. You'll get to do that on this problem, number 30, and they may not all be like terms. Let's see our final clip, John Wayne in Red River.
Say it now, because I don't want to ever hear it again. I don't like quitters, especially when they're not good enough to finish what they start. I'll read over them in the morning.
Planting and reading, planting and reading. Fill a man full of lead, stick him in the ground, and then read words at him. Why, when you've killed a man, why try to read the Lord in as a partner on the job?
Got you in the leg, huh?
Yeah.
He's setting.
Say goodbye to Scruffy, and you guys have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.